Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Julian Carter, and I am 32 years old. I was wrapping up a few last work emails at my desk at home in Brookstone, North Carolina, when my phone started buzzing across the wood like it had a mind of its own. The caller ID flashed my wife's name, and over the first ring, I could already hear waves of laughter spilling through the tiny speaker from next door at our neighbor Tracy's place, where the monthly girls' night had migrated into its usual chorus of voices and wineglass clinks. "Hey, what is up?" I answered, half expecting a quick favor. Maybe she needed her wallet or a forgotten charger. Instead, what came through the line had that theatrical pitch in her voice she saved for an audience. Ladies, quiet down. I'm about to do something that has been a long time coming." The laughter dimmed. It took me a heartbeat to realize I was on speakerphone. Inside my chest, something went still. "Honey," my wife, Brianna, said, drawing the word out as if we were in a play. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I have made a decision. We are done forever. This marriage is over." Silence fell on both ends, dense and deliberate. Then came the collective intake of breath. A few high-pitched, "oh my goodness" reactions. The whisper I knew was supposed to be secret, but carried anyway. Is she serious right now? I sat very still, aware of my heartbeat, but not my breathing, aware of the room, but not the walls. There had been plenty of nights where our relationship was turned into a running joke at girls' night. Apparently, my alleged inability to load the dishwasher and my supposed lack of emotional intelligence made for easy punchlines when the Sauvignon Blanc was flowing. But this was not a joke. This was not teasing. This was a declaration. The room next door, their room, not mine, was waiting for my lines. They expected pleading or confusion, juicy questions they could pass around like an hors d'oeuvre tray. Drama to keep pouring. I let air into my lungs and set my voice at neutral. Even. "Understood," I said. "Take care." I pressed end, set the phone face down, and returned to my email as if I had just cleared a calendar reminder. Inside, a quiet decision unspooled and found its edges. When someone shows you who they are, you believe them. She had to show me how she saw us, how she saw me, and she had chosen to do it in front of an audience. The choice was clear. I opened my laptop fully and started with the practical things that keep a life together. We kept separate accounts, but she had a card tied to mine for her shopping trips and those upscale Friday dinners that made Instagram look generous. Her mother, Gloria, had access to one of my cards as well, originally for emergencies and then, by slow creep, for her weekly grocery runs at Target. 20 minutes later, both cards were canceled. I changed my passwords, rotated the two-factor authentication, and updated my security questions to answers only I would know. I called the bank and spoke to a representative who verified my identity and then, at my request, put a hold on any attempt to add new authorized users to my accounts. I imagined the moment Gloria's card would decline under fluorescent lights and tried not to picture the scene. This was not revenge. It was alignment. Then I moved to the household subscriptions that had turned into the infrastructure of a normal evening. I changed the password on our Netflix, Spotify, and Amazon accounts, removed her profiles with a few keystrokes, and canceled the bloated premium cable package she insisted we needed for her reality television shows, the ones that claimed hours and then claimed more. Basic cable would be fine for me. My phone buzzed in a steady, escalating rhythm, but I ignored it. By the time midnight brushed at the windows, the message notifications had stacked into neat little numbers that I refused to read. The house felt quiet in the most peaceful way. I made a note to call a locksmith first thing in the morning, clear the coffee mugs, and turn off the lamp. I slept deeply for the first time in months. Morning arrived with a streak of light across the kitchen tile and the faint smell of rain outside. I brewed coffee and exhaled warmth into my first sip. The phone buzzed again and again, 17 missed calls, 43 messages, then a number I recognized lit up the screen. I answered it without moving from the window. "Hello," I said, already hearing strain in the breath on the other end. "What did you do?" Gloria demanded. The sound of her voice was half outrage, half humiliation. "My card was declined at Target. The cashier had to void my entire transaction in front of everyone." I let a small pause exist. "Good morning to you too," I said, setting my cup down. Do not you dare take that tone with me, she snapped, not talking to me so much as around me. The credit cards. Dear Lord. What did you allow him to do? There was muffled conversation, Brianna in the background, a flurry I could almost see. She is asking what happened to the accounts, Gloria said. She ended our marriage last night, publicly, for entertainment. I replied evenly, so I took her at her word and acted accordingly. Silence landed, followed by the faint shuffle of a hand over the receiver and whispers I could not parse. When she returned, her voice was lower, more urgent. She says it was just girl talk. You cannot just cut off family like that. I am not family anymore, I said. Remember? She made that clear to a room full of people. I ended the call and blocked both numbers before I could talk myself out of it. The phone screen returned to the lock image. The coffee had not cooled. I took another sip and watched the day brighten. The neighborhood waking up like a small town always does, steady and predictable. The locksmith came at 9:30 and was done by 10. We spoke in brief, polite sentences while he replaced the deadbolt and handed me 2 new keys in a little Ziploc bag. Fresh start, he said. Not a question, so much of the line people use when they do not know which words are best. Something like that, I said, and he tipped his cap and drove away. Around noon, the doorbell rang and then the door rattled. I watched from the kitchen as Brianna tried her key, failed, and tried again, confusion rippling across her face. Her hair was pulled back in yesterday's style. Last night's makeup gave the impression of a hard shadow around her eyes. She started pounding. Julian, she called, we need to talk. I opened the door but did not move aside. Up close, she looked like the aftermath of an argument with a mirror. What is wrong with you? She snapped, pushing past the threshold with her gaze if not her feet. You have humiliated me in front of everyone. I humiliated you, I asked, almost laughing. You put me on speakerphone and announced our divorce to a room full of people like it was a game. You humiliated yourself. It was not serious, she said, trying on a gentler tone the way one tries a different blazer. The girls were talking about their relationships, and things got heated, and I just got caught up in the moment. So our 7-year marriage is something you get caught up about when you need material? I asked. She reached down, fingers curling like she might brush past me, and I closed the door a fraction. You cannot keep me out of my own home, she protested. This is my house. My name is on the deed, I said calmly. You want it out, so you are out of everything that comes with it. She stared at me, calculation behind the tears that came on cue. Where am I supposed to go? She asked. My mother is furious. I cannot afford my own place right now. Sounds like you should have thought about that before your performance last night, I said. She put her foot in the door and leaned forward, that old familiar tactic where pressure substitutes for logic. Please just let me come inside, so we can talk like adults. Adults do not publicly humiliate their spouses for laughs, I replied. We are past talking. She withdrew her foot. I closed the door gently and watched her from the window as she cycled through tears, anger, and finally retreat, walking down the path with her shoulders up around her ears. I could have texted her something. I could have answered the calls. I chose not to. Instead, I turned back to my computer and confirmed my appointment with an attorney for the next morning. The office was in the city center near the county courthouse, a beige building with a lobby that smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. I gathered everything I needed, a folder with our mortgage paperwork, bank statements, and a typed list of accounts and access changes I had made. Before I left the house that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Tracy next door. Are you all right? I did not want to intrude, but last night went too far. I stared at the little gray speech bubble that hung there like a hand at the doorframe. I typed back, I appreciate you asking. I am fine. Then I put the phone on silent and went for a walk down the block. The next morning, I sat across from attorney Reginald Howard in a quiet conference room, decorated with framed degrees and a legal-themed watercolor that tried to make the law look like poetry. He was in his 50s, steady, the kind of man who speaks with well-placed pauses. So, he said, scanning the notes I had prepared, she announced the divorce publicly, and you are taking her at her word. Exactly, I said. I want a clean separation of assets, no joint debts, no shared responsibilities. She wanted out, so she gets out completely. Any children? He asked, pen ready over the legal pad. No children, I said. The house is in my name only. So are both cars. She has her personal belongings and what is in her individual checking account, which, last I knew, was about $200. He raised an eyebrow. She does not work? He asked. Part-time retail at the mall, I said. Maybe 15 hours a week. She is 32 years old. Her mother has been floating extra expenses for years, and I have absorbed the rest. He nodded slowly. There could be a claim for support, but the circumstances here, her public termination of the marriage, the lack of shared assets, the absence of children, these make a certain outcome more likely. We will proceed with the petition based on irreconcilable differences. We spent an hour reviewing dates, accounts, and the small details that become large in a courtroom. The precision was comforting. Paper does not perform for an audience. It simply records. When I left, the sky was a clean late morning blue. I drove home with the radio off and the windows open, the breeze on my forearms feeling like a new agreement with the air. Brianna was waiting in the driveway, dressed as if she were headed to brunch in Raleigh. Polished, intentional, that same perfume that once made me stop in the kitchen doorway and forget what I was about to say. We need to talk, she said, stepping closer. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize how wrong I was. There is nothing to talk about, I said. I have a meeting with my attorney this afternoon to finalize the paperwork. The color left her face, then returned in a rush. Attorney? You are actually serious about this? You announced our marriage was over forever, I said. Why would I not be serious? She shifted tactics. Baby, I was drunk. The girls were being dramatic about their own relationships, and I got caught up in it. You know how it is with wine and group mentality. I took a step back. So, you are saying you only disrespect me when you're drinking with friends? That is not reassuring. Tears arrived on cue, full and glistening. Please do not do this to us, she said. We can work through this. We can try couples counseling. There is no us anymore, I said. You ended that last night. Remember? The tears stopped abruptly, replaced by anger that sharpened her words. You are being completely unreasonable, she said. It was one mistake. No, I said. Marrying someone who treats their spouse like a joke for their friends is the mistake. Last night was the wake-up call. She took a breath and adjusted again. Look, even if you want space, you cannot just kick me out with nowhere to go. I need time to figure things out. You should have figured things out before you decided to end our marriage for laughs, I said. I will not sign anything, she said, jaw set. You cannot force me to get divorced. Actually, I can, I said. It is called irreconcilable differences. Your public announcement with witnesses makes this straightforward. She looked at me like I had spoken a language she did not know. You are bluffing. Try me, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her attorney Howard's contact in my recent calls. The initial paperwork has already been filed. She stood there a long moment, the performance collapsing around the edges. You cannot be serious. Over one night. One night where you publicly humiliated your husband for entertainment. I said. Yes, I am serious about that. She watched me walk toward the front door and did not follow. She got in her car and sat for 20 minutes, turning her phone in her hands, calling someone else to workshop the next scene. After she drove away, I drove to the bank. At the counter, a teller named Angela recognized me and greeted me with the kind of warmth that makes you remember people are watching even when they're quiet about it. How can I help you today? She asked. I want to confirm the holds I requested on adding authorized users and verify recent changes, I said. She clicked through screens, confirmed what needed confirming, and then gave me a small, measured smile. I do not mean to intrude, she said softly, but I heard a bit about what happened. People are saying you handled a difficult situation with a lot of class. I let the words land and did not attempt to grab them. I just took someone at her word. I said, well, she said, sliding me a printed confirmation. It is refreshing to see someone who does not put up with disrespect. Good for you. At the hardware store later that afternoon, Caleb at the register lifted his chin when I walked in. Heard you were going through it, he said while he rang up the door sweeps and a box of contractor bags I picked up to sort through old junk in the garage. My wife mentioned night before last turned into a scene. Just taking care of overdue business, I said. He nodded, the way men in small towns nod when they are offering both respect and distance. The truth of that night began moving through our social circle like water, finding the easiest path downhill. At the grocery store, I ran into Keisha, one of Brianna's friends from girls' night. standing over a display of romaine. "Julian," she said, hesitant, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened. That was really uncomfortable for everyone." "I appreciate that," I said. "For what it is worth," she continued, lowering her voice though no one else was in earshot. "Most of us thought she went way too far. Nobody knew she was going to put you on speaker like that. When you hung up, she started crying and saying she did not mean it." I nodded, choosing my words. She seemed confident when she was performing it. Keisha winced. "That is just it. It did feel like a performance. Like she wanted to outdo everyone's stories." Later that week, my phone lit up with a call from Cedric, my brother-in-law, married to Brianna's sister, Yolanda. "Man, what happened?" he asked. "She has been calling my wife nonstop, saying you have lost your mind." "She announced our divorce publicly for entertainment," I said, tired of softening the edges. I took her seriously. "Now she's upset there are consequences." He paused. "She actually said that? Like, word for word?" "Yes," I said. "We are done forever. This marriage is over." On speakerphone, in front of witnesses. Silence held for a beat. "Now she is saying you are overreacting," he muttered. "That is the current story," I said. "Well," Cedric said, "my wife has been feeling bad for her. But if that is what really happened—" "It is," I said. "I have nothing to gain by lying about it." After that call, Yolanda stopped returning Brianna's texts. A network that had caught her many times began to thin. A day later, Gloria called using a number I had not blocked yet. "I need to understand what happened," she said, sounding as if she had aged overnight. "She has been staying here for a week, crying constantly, saying you turned everyone against her." "I have not turned anyone," I said. "I have only told the truth. She ended our marriage publicly. I accepted it. Now she wants to edit the scene and pretend it never happened." "Surely you can work this out," Gloria said, voice softer, tugged by hope. "Young people say things they do not mean all the time." "She is 32 years old," I said. "That is old enough to be accountable for words and actions." There was a long breath. "What do you want from her?" Gloria asked. "Nothing," I said. "I want her to live with the consequences of her decision and stop trying to manipulate everyone into believing she is the victim." The line stayed quiet, then clicked, then ended. Meanwhile, life simplified. I went back to the gym, the one off Pinecrest Road with dumbbells that have been dropped so often they carry a history in their rubber. Jordan, a trainer who knows something about mindsets as well as muscles, greeted me with a grin. "Back at it?" he asked. "Back at it," I said, and the repetition of rows and presses and cool-down stretches became a ritual that replaced another ritual I no longer wanted. I slept through the night. I ate actual breakfast instead of grabbing whatever was easy and calling that nourishment. When people in town nodded or smiled or chose silence, I let them. The house felt different, lighter, like it had been holding its breath, and finally exhaled. The next week, I saw Brianna at the mall where she worked. She looked exhausted, her smile slipping whenever she forgot it was supposed to be on. She saw me near the escalators and started walking in my direction, hope moving across her face like a stage light. I gave a polite nod and kept walking into my afternoon. No drama, no scene. Later I heard she cried after I left. That was not my responsibility anymore. 2 Sundays later, I was having lunch at Palmetto Kitchen, our usual spot downtown. The place was packed with the after-church crowd, people we knew scattered across the dining room. I was halfway through my coffee when she walked in. The timing was not an accident. Her dress, her hair, the volume of her voice as she neared my table. None of it was accidental. "What a surprise seeing you here," she said, just loud enough for the tables around us to notice. "Mind if I sit?" I gestured at the empty chair. "It is a free country." She sat and launched into a speech that was both familiar and rehearsed. "I have been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks, and I realize how much I have missed you." A couple at the next table paused their conversation. "Have you?" I asked. I let her keep going. "Yes," she said, her voice building redemptive arcs. "I think we should try to work things out. What happened that night was a huge mistake, and I have learned from it." Her eyes shone. The volume rose. Tears arrived, right on cue. She was banking on sympathy or pressure or both. I set my cup down and looked at her, then past her to the faces that had turned, then back to her. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, my voice calm but clear enough to carry. You want to reconcile with a man whose marriage you ended for entertainment in front of a room full of people? The man you put on speakerphone to announce you were done forever. Her face flushed. That was a mistake, she said, voice smaller now. No, I replied. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. What you did was a deliberate choice to humiliate your husband. There's a difference. The restaurant had quieted around us, as if the air was listening. Please just give us another chance, she said. I promise I will never do anything like that again. Just like you promised to love and honor me when we got married. I asked, how did that work out? A few forks clinked against plates. Someone coughed. She looked around and realized the crowd she had counted on was not offering her the script she wanted. I was drinking, she said, trying a final angle. People say things they do not mean when they are drinking. So you were saying alcohol makes you disrespect your husband? I asked. That is supposed to reassure me. She cried harder, and for the first time I felt nothing but clarity. I stood, set money on the table for my meal, and slid my chair back under with quiet care. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, but it will not be with me. I walked out. In the parking lot, she followed, heels clicking quickly. You made me look like a fool in there, she hissed when we were outside and away from the listening room. You made yourself look like a fool, I said. I just answered your questions honestly. No one will want anything to do with me after this, she said. That is not my problem, I answered. You created this situation. I hate you, she shouted, loud enough for two people walking toward their cars to turn their heads. And there's the real you, I said quietly. The one who hates her husband when she does not get her way. Thank God I do not have to live with that anymore. That afternoon, I received a text from Attorney Howard's office. Papers will be ready in the morning. 3 days later, the documents were served to her at the retail store where she worked. I did not see it happen, but in the kind of town where everyone knows everyone else's dentist, word travels. By the time I swung by the hardware store for a filter, Caleb gave me a sympathetic look that said he knew more than he wanted to. There was the legal work, the inventory of assets, the narrow funnel of forms that must be filled, checked, signed. I boxed up her personal items, clothes, framed photos with her friends, a jewelry organizer she adored, notebooks, and labeled each box clearly. I sent a single email to a new address she had provided through her attorney, listing the items and offering 2 pickup time windows when I would be gone. She responded with a furious paragraph that accused me of cruelty. I replied with the same 2-time windows and nothing else. Her friend Sierra called me from a block number 2 days later. Julian, she said, gentle but intrusive, maybe you could meet her halfway? She is scared. I will not be meeting privately or making verbal agreements, I said. Everything goes through counsel. That protects everyone. She exhaled. You really are done. I am, I said. This is the cleanest way. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a rhythm. Work, gym, food that made sense, evenings that did not feel like a tightrope. One night, I drove into the city for a small jazz show at a spot I always intended to visit, but never did because it was too late or too far or not her thing. A trio on stage made an old standard feel new again, and I sat back, grateful for the way music can rearrange a person's insides without asking permission. I heard about her through the usual channels. Brianna tried to repair what could be repaired. She showed up at Tracy's door with a cake and a speech. The girls' night group stopped responding to her invitations. People have long memories when it comes to humiliation. Her mother gave her a place to sleep for a while, and then, after one too many arguments about money, told her she needed to step out of that arrangement and stand on her own. We had one brief hearing, procedural and tidy, because there were no deep disputes once the attorneys did their arithmetic. No children to argue over, no shared retirement accounts, no disputed heirlooms other than the kind people pretend are heirlooms. The judge read the provisions like a grocery list and nodded when both sides indicated consent. Paper was placed in a file. A stamp landed. An ending was recorded. 3 months later, I sat in Attorney Howard's office and signed the last signature that legally recognized what had been true since that night next door. Clean separation, he said, sliding each document to the stack. She gets her personal belongings and what was in her accounts. You keep the house, both vehicles, all other assets. No alimony. No shared debts. She agreed to all of this. I asked. Eventually, he said. Her attorney advised her that fighting it would be expensive and futile given the circumstances. I walked out into the afternoon and felt something I had not felt in years. Lightness that started at my sternum and reached my shoulders and simply stayed. Without my income, Brianna found full-time work. Last I heard, she was juggling 2 jobs to pay for a studio apartment across town. Gloria, after months of bad nights, told her daughter that she loved her but would not fund another round of chaos. In our circles, people quietly moved their chairs away from the version of her that had always relied on audience. Trust broke. Trust stayed broken. Life in my house did not just normalize, it improved. I lost 15 pounds without obsessing about it. I was sleeping through the night. Saturday mornings became mine in a way they had not been in years. I reconnected with people I had drifted from, friend from work who stopped inviting me out because it always turned into drama, old college buddies who remembered the pre-marriage version of me and seemed relieved to see him again. One Friday, I hosted a small car night at my place. We grilled in the backyard under a sky that kept clearing. Someone brought a playlist that made everyone nod in agreement. Halfway through the second game, my friend Avery looked at me and said, "You seem different." "I am different," I said. "I am myself again." The house itself felt as if it had been rearranged without moving any furniture. No one following me from room to room with commentary. No background hum of disapproval. I could read on the couch in peace. I could decide dinner at 7 or 9. I could sit with silence and prefer to noise. Financially, everything simplified. Without her constant purchases, new dresses for one-time events, spa treatments that were absolutely necessary, dinners that needed to be photographed, I watched my savings grow in quiet, satisfying numbers. I started looking at vacation ideas I could afford on my own terms. A long weekend in New Orleans to hear music where music was born from joy and pain and persistence. A drive up the Blue Ridge to watch the sky shift color. A few months after the papers were final, I ran into Sierra at a coffee shop downtown. She approached cautiously, cup in hand, apology on her face. "I heard the divorce went through," she said. "I wanted you to know a lot of us felt terrible about that night. We should have stopped her." "Water under the bridge," I said. "But thank you." "For what it is worth," she said, "you handled everything with a lot of class. Most guys would have made it ugly." "No point in that," I replied. She showed me who she was. Everything after that was paperwork. Sierra nodded and excused herself politely, the way people do when they are careful not to overstay in someone else's story. The relief I felt was not dramatic. It was steady. It did not require an audience. It rewarded silence. When I thought about our wedding day, a warm June afternoon when we stood in front of family and friends and promised things we did not fully understand, I felt a sadness that was round and complete. We were 2 different people making promises neither of us was equipped to keep. Early in our marriage, I brushed off the little performances at gatherings, the way Brianna would tell stories that made me the straight man, the image she sold to her friends where she was the cultured one and I was the practical foil. I remember a barbecue at Tracy's where she did 10 minutes on how I could not load a dishwasher to save my life, and I laughed because everyone else did. But something tight lodged itself in my chest after. A small stone I carried home. The stone multiplied over the years. Another story here, another jab there, until it became a weight that made the house feel smaller. I did not name it as disrespect. I called it personality. I called it her sense of humor. I told myself to stop being sensitive. That night at girls' night cracked the polite shell around a truth I had been avoiding. Jokes with an audience and humiliation share a border too easily crossed by people who crave attention. The day I changed the locks, the locksmith asked me if I wanted to keep the old deadbolt. "No," I said. He put it into his toolbox anyway. That night, I slept like the house itself had assured me it was on my side. It is a strange thing to live alone after years of different rhythm. The quiet sounds like a question at first. Eventually it sounded like music. 2 weeks into the process, I received a formal message from Brianna's attorney suggesting mediation. I wrote back, through mine, that I prefer to proceed with the filing as is. I had learned to distrust any room where she could perform. Tears when it helped, anger when that helped more. Written words and legal forms gave me what I needed. Clarity without theatrics. I handled things methodically. I reviewed the insurance policies and took her off the car plan with proper notice. I adjusted my life insurance beneficiary. I updated the emergency contact at work from spouse to my brother, Walter, who called me that same evening after seeing the paperwork come through on his end. "You good?" he asked. "I am," I said. "Truly." Walter paused. "We did not say anything before, but it always seemed like you were walking on glass," he admitted. I said. I did not realize how loud it was until the room quieted. He exhaled on the line, a sound of relief that matched mine. "Proud of you," he said, "for choosing yourself." On the day I boxed up the last of her belongings, I found a stack of old greeting cards in a drawer. Early messages from her were soft and earnest, full of promises about teamwork and forever and loving each other's flaws. Later ones were beautiful on the outside and thin inside. It is funny how paper can tell the truth if you let yourself read it. When she came by to pick up her boxes, accompanied by her attorney's assistant for neutrality, I was gone, as promised. She later sent a message through counsel accusing me of labeling the boxes in a cold and clinical way. I smiled. Clinical was fine by me. Clinical is how hospitals save lives and how courtrooms run on time. One afternoon not long after, I ran into Tracy at the mailbox. She looked tired. "I hate what happened," she said, hands tucked into her sleeves. "The night got out of hand. I should have stopped it." "It is not your fault," I said. "People make their choices. That was hers." "Still," she said, "it ended here. That sits with me." "We all carry our corners," I said. She nodded. I thought again about how easily people gather around drama, how quickly a room can become an echo chamber where the loudest person gets to set the tone. The older I get, the more grateful I am for the quiet people, the ones who pull a friend aside instead of cheering the performance. You recognize them by their silences and the way they look you in the eye when everyone else looks away. Perhaps the sharpest lesson was simple. Boundaries are not punishments. They are definitions. By accepting Brianna's public declaration, I was not being cruel. I was finally believing what she said and acting in alignment with it. It spared both of us the long, slow decline of pretending a thing is whole when it has already split down the center. In the end, there was no grand speech and no final scene in a crowded room. There was just my signature on a line, the sound of the pen against paper, and the lightness that followed. She wanted drama. She got consequences. I wanted peace. I got my life back. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is living so well that the noise falls away and you can finally hear yourself think. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.